So I'm Mike with To The Point Podcast and Indian River Connections, and I'm here with Jennifer Pippin from Moms for Liberty, and you do another organization too locally, right?
We the People of
We the
Indian River
People.
County. Mm-hmm.
And we're talking today about, well, the new excitement, I would say, on social media is your interview with a local columnist. I don't know if I'd call him a journalist. Is that
I call him a blogger.
a blogger? He
Yeah,
does a one-pager, right?
correct.
You usually
Yes.
find it on the trash cans at local restaurants.
Right,
Yeah.
pretty much, yeah.
So, uh, well, his name is Russ Lemons, right?
That's
And
correct.
he does lemon limes. And you guys have some history as far as the books go. But before we get into that, what got your involvement in with these books? What started your attention? What grabbed your attention with this issue?
Sure, absolutely. So first of all, thank you so much for having me on. But yeah, so October 27th of 2021, I watched a video on YouTube of a mom reading a book called All Boys Aren't Blue by George Johnson in Pennsylvania, and she found it in her child's elementary school. And it was a very graphic anal rape scene. And when I saw that, I said, oh my goodness, I said, I hope that that book's not in our schools. I said, there's no way that book's in our schools. We're in a red state. We're in a red county. There's no way that Indian River County schools would have that book. But just to kind of ease my mind to know that that kind of material wasn't in our schools, I immediately emailed the board and the superintendent and said, hey, how do I access the library system to see if a certain book's in there or certain authors in there? And immediately I got an email back from Jacqueline Rosario, who's one of our school board members, and she said, hey, here's the link, and you can, search it by author or by, title or whatever. So I immediately went on there and typed in All Boys Aren't Blue, and I found that it was in one of our high schools. So that's what kind of started this whole thing. And, I challenged that book immediately. I didn't know the policy. I didn't know the procedure. So I just sent that video and all of the information that I had on the book and that was in Vero Beach High School to the superintendent and the school board and the superintendent of curriculum and instruction at the time. And they immediately removed it within 24 hours once they verified that passage was in there. So that's what kind of started everything here in Indian River County and pretty much on the Treasure Coast and most of Florida.
So, not to interrupt you, but that seemed like the start of a good move on
Absolutely.
behalf of the district.
Sure.
What happened from there?
So what happened was politics. So people started voicing their opinions, saying this was censorship, this was a violation of First Amendment rights. Children are doing these things, so they should be able to read about it. Children have been raped. There has been incest, there is pedophilia, and children need to be exposed to these things. So as we unraveled more titles, Florida Citizens Alliance had a list from 2019 of pictures and cited information, and that we started pulling, and we got a team together looking at these books in the schools, and so many of these books that were flagged by other organizations we had in our schools. So as we challenged these titles, we sent it to every school board member, the superintendent and the superintendent of curriculum and instruction, and as the news came in, they started forming their own opinions and saying that these books were not in schools, because at that time, it was during COVID, we weren't allowed in the libraries. So we were relying solely on, ebooks or, the cited materials, and then going back and checking the ebooks or purchasing the books. I was purchasing some of these used on Amazon to verify, yep, on page 59, yes, that's there. So as we looked and looked and looked, it took about 3 years, and we've gotten 245 permanently removed from the schools here.
So at that point, when you realized it was going to get political, you are with Moms for Liberty already at this point, right?
That's right.
And you guys put together your own team within Moms for Liberty?
Correct.
Or was this because I somewhat remember school board members appointing people to review a lot. What was that called? The review process? Or?
So the first library book committee was put together by Richard Meyer, who's no longer with us. He was the curriculum instructor director, and it was all media center specialists. So no parents, nobody in there just looking as a citizen.
Right.
It was all of the people that purchased these materials, reviewing their own work, and wanted to put their materials back on the shelves.
So at that, what was the process then? How do our libraries get filled with books
Sure.
then?
Sure.
Before
So
exposure.
when we brought this to light in the end of 2021, books had not been reviewed in our school district, the superintendent said, since 2014. So people would go to like publishers like Scholastic or Follett and order the top 100 books that kids want to read. So let's say you and I made a book and it had a graphic rape scene in it. We would sell it to these publishing companies and say, oh, this is, a kid's book. It's going to be, we want to get published. We want to, make a couple $1,000,000. So those companies would push out our book saying it's a top 100 book that kids want to read to push our book out. So we're making money and they're making money.
So there's
and
no like
and nobody's cracked open the
oversight.
book.
There's no like authentication. Like it probably not a top 100.
That's
book.
right. That's right. And how we got All Boys Aren't Blue is they ordered the top 100 books that kids want to read in 2019, I believe it was, and then they got 10 free books. So that was one of the free 10 books that they got for the order.
And none of those were reviewed when
No,
they got delivered.
They were not reviewed by the media center specialists. They were not reviewed by citizens. They just went on the shelves because they're already barcoded. They're the top 100 books that kids want to read and just put on the shelves for children.
All right, so now post exposure, a lot of leeway was made with Governor DeSantis, a lot of attention brought down on it. And Florida, I believe, was one of the states that kind of paved the way in reforming this process, and Moms for Liberty had the biggest role in that. What is the process now?
Sure. So now the process, the laws have always been in place for the obscenity statute, saying you can't have sadomasochism, bestiality, things like that for children. The pornography statute, there isn't case law attached to it, so we have to use the Merriam-Webster dictionary definition, which was actually said here that went to the state, actually in the state training. So, nothing that would arouse. You can't have something that's available to children that would arouse children. So when we were looking at all these books, we're like, okay, does it fit that obscenity statute or does it fit the definition of pornography? So the laws haven't changed, but the way that you can challenge books has. So there's been multiple laws that have been implemented, 22, 23, now 24, that says that, if you read it at the podium, for example, and you get stopped, by a school board member, that book gets, permanently removed from the school district.
And that was legislation.
Yes,
right?
that was legislation. Yep, you could challenge with the district, you can challenge with a certified media center specialist, you can challenge with a principal, where all of these policies were not in place, in 2021 when we originally did the challenge.
So pretty much it was just a parent going to raise hell to get anything done before that.
Absolutely.
Now, there's legislation.
Yes.
So my next question is, what do you say to the people who make it about politics? Judging by social media, and national news, there's some people who believe the government owes things to us or our children. As part of it, their argument against removing the books is some of these things have happened to these kids and they should have access to this as a therapeutic value. Me personally, I haven't seen anything therapeutic or academic about it. What do you say to those people that just believe that the schools should offer these things? Not just not remove them, but should actually offer that type of material.
Sure. So at the end of the day, we have to follow the law. So when you look at the law says it cannot be in K-12 schools. Absolutely appropriate for the public library and the adult section. So what's happened that's really cool here, Mike, is all of the books that have gotten removed from here that were paid by taxpayers are now in the adult section of the public libraries in the county. So if a parent or guardian wants their child to read about bestiality or incest or graphic rape, and they think their child, that's appropriate for their child, they could borrow for free at the public library, or they can buy from, Amazon. Most of the books that I have saved, over the past couple of years are just a couple dollars on Amazon. They get here in a couple days. Barnes and Noble, local bookstores. So it's not banning. Banning is when you can't have something. What's banned is guns in schools, tobacco products in schools, drugs in schools, not these books. And again, it's protecting children, protecting the innocence of children. And if you have to read a graphic rape, one of the books that were removed from Vero Beach High School, Push, a novel by Sapphire, a girl's impregnated by her father twice and raped and molested, and then the mother's getting involved, and it is just some of the most foul language you've ever heard. If you have to show a child that for them to understand rape and incest. That's not the way we're teaching children. That's not in the health statutes. That's not. So there's a healthy way to teach children, and there's not a non-healthy way.
I think there's a mental breakdown globally right now with the grooming and child trafficking. I don't believe there's a valid argument for these books to be in the school. And I don't really agree with the criticism Moms for Liberty takes on as far as being monsters. I've been to a few meetings with you guys, and I haven't seen any monsters yet. One of those meetings, we did talk with a sheriff, or a sheriff's candidate, and we have talked with the sheriff about him also, because this question has come up multiple times, where they didn't see probable reason to file charges when it came to holding somebody at district level accountable, because they weren't afraid charges would stick. I know that's how law enforcement agencies work, but at the same time, the biggest example was if somebody were to come show my child that book at the grocery store, it would be child endangerment. Right. It would be predatory. But why is it so different? Why do these people think it's so different in the school?
I agree. So it would be a third-degree felony if someone was to show your child that at the grocery store, but then they try to deem it, okay here, which again doesn't make sense to me either. So when we went to law enforcement, we didn't want anybody to get fired. We didn't want anybody to go to jail. We just wanted those books removed. We wanted those books removed like they are now, years later,
to go right from the sheriff would be great.
Absolutely, and say, hey, these are inappropriate for children. And Sheriff Flowers did write a letter to the school district after they couldn't pin the investigation on anybody. When he came to our meeting, he explained that, did they pin it on, did they arrest all the media center specialists? Would they arrest the principals because they're in charge of the schools? Would they arrest the school board because they're in charge of purchasing the materials? Would they charge the curriculum instruction director because they're over everything? So they really couldn't pin it on anybody to have a criminal charge. So like if you and I, went and broke into a place, we would get in trouble for that break-in. They couldn't pin that on, one person or a group of people for our criminal investigation. But Sheriff Flowers did write a letter to the school board and sent it to them and the superintendent, basically saying that these books are inappropriate for children and you should be reviewing these before putting them back on the shelves.
I remember reading his letter, and I thought it lacked some meat, but at the same time I can understand the position of using resources and applying charges where sometimes at state level charges just don't stick. So
that's right.
So moving on to what's coming up, we touched on it briefly. Your interview with local blogger. Give us a little bit of the backstory between the two of you, and what's this next interview going to be about?
Sure. So Russ and I do not see eye to eye. Our morals and values do not align at any capacity. I don't know if he has children or not, but I have two children. One just graduated, actually, one that actually goes to public school and one that just graduated from public school. I went through public school. My parents went through public school. So, when people always try to say, oh, Moms for Liberty, they're not for public school, they're for private school, and they want the Christian national, absolutely incorrect. So as a graduate of public school, my children going through it, him and I don't see eye to eye on much. And so I did an interview with him in November of 21 after we challenged a couple of books, and we went on the Rhett Palmer show with a couple other people. And he basically said that if 50 books or more came out of the schools and were permanently removed, he would owe Moms for Liberty and I an apology because he didn't think it was going to happen. So at that original interview, I gave him the entire list of books. I gave him all the cited material. He didn't read it prior to that interview, and I even asked him, did you read the cited material or any of the books? Like, let's talk about any of the books that I gave you. And it was about a list of 45. It wasn't much. And he said no. He's flipping through a list from, another county or another state. I don't even know. He came with his own materials. I came with everything that I gave him, for full transparency. And so he's talking about books that weren't even challenged here in Indian River County. So it's hard to have a honest conversation with someone when they don't even know the material that we're talking about.
Taking the subject for granted.
Right, exactly. So so now we're going to be doing a follow-up interview, years later now, and he owes Moms for Liberty an apology.
I agree. And that interview will take place with another local media outlet, and they're called Evergreen Media Network, which they're new up and coming. so is Indian River Connections and the Sunshine Journal, who recently purchased Indian River News. I'd like to give them all a shout out because local media is where you find out the facts. Now take that for granted. Not taking that for granted, we come from a pretty red county and a pretty red state is what the data shows us. I have philosophy as far as our politicians go in this county, but how has this whole subject exposed, let's say, fake conservatives or fake rhinos?
Sure, absolutely.
Have you come across your share of that, especially we've seen that on the school board. We've seen people jump parties. And then we see it in local journalism. So is this just another layer of exposure? How do you see the politics playing out in the county as far as that goes?
It's I was never paying attention to local politics until COVID happened. I was kind of one of those. I was working full time. I had 2 children. When COVID hit, I had a middle school and an elementary schooler. And, again, between work and their sports and everything, I never got involved because I thought everybody at the school board had the children's best interests, all the teachers, all the principals. And for the most part in our county, we are very blessed with amazing, district staff and amazing teachers. But it's those few, like any profession, that ruin it for the good ones. So I quickly learned with COVID when we shut down, I said, what are we doing shutting down for a virus? Why are we wearing masks? Why are we having these all of these things that I was like, this isn't right. I have to do something. And I remember the day that I looked at my husband, I said, I have to do something because this isn't right. My kids are at home. They're not seeing their friends. They're keeping everybody apart, safer together apart. And I said, I have to do something. And what I've noticed is there's been a split over the past couple of years since COVID. And you see the people who are really showing themselves and they say, oh, I'm a strong conservative Republican. No, you're not. And they know they're not. And they're slowly getting, exposed. I mean, we censured, Brian Barefoot when he was on the school board for defying Governor DeSantis's mask order and against the health department rule and all of these things. He broke the law. Our district was looking at a $1.3 million fine that would come from taxpayers, that would come from our kids. And there was people who left the Republican Executive Committee because they didn't like that coming about. We're seeing, divides now within the party because of people seeing the truth and the facts and the stats and not wanting to believe it and believing in that good old boy system or, oh, this person's a good person, this person's connected to this. No, we need to look at the facts, the stats, and the truth and then make a determination. And it may not be what we always thought was. Just like with the books, when I first saw, I said, there's no way that these books are in our schools. That would never happen. I totally have my blinders on. I probably could have went the other way and said, there's no way that these books are in there. And then after I read book after book and watching video after video and looking at these lists that other, places had made. I mean, there's over 30 lists across the country of cited books that people have read and done book reports. I said, this is real, this is happening, and they're in our schools. And, so again, going back to politics, there's so many people that say that, they're one side or the other. Well, you really never hear a Democrat, pretending to be a Republican. So the rhinos, it's like, so many of them now are registered Republicans just to be able to vote in the race, and then they're going to switch back to vote for their Democratic candidate.
I was talking about that today, and I think part of the problem in Florida statute is the closed primaries. Sheriff's race, for one, where you have a write-in candidate or just an opposition candidate or an enlisted opposition candidate can file and essentially close a primary and shut out. For our sheriff's race, there's 3 serious conservative candidates and 1 progressive outfielder. She essentially closed the primary, from what I understand. And so essentially, only the registered Republicans will have a vote for the next sheriff. So I think that's pretty critical, and I think it's something that they should be looking at. But at the same time, there should be more integrity in voter integrity.
Absolutely.
In a different way of wording it. So before we wrap it up, the interview with Evergreen Media Network is when?
Monday at noon.
Monday.
And
at
it'll
noon?
be on their Facebook page live streamed.
Okay, they're live streaming. Okay. Also, Moms for Liberty only endorses school board candidates. Is that
That's
just
correct.
county, at the
Yes.
county level, or is that the organization's policy?
So with Moms for Liberty, because we're a 501c4, we only endorse school board candidates, and
Okay.
each county, governs their own, organization. So we only endorse school board candidates. So what we do is we have the option of doing a school board forum. We didn't do that here in Indian River County because we figured 2 of the 4 wouldn't show up and it would just be an echo chamber. We sent out a
Plus,
survey.
they were rhinos.
Right,
Yeah.
correct. We sent out a survey to all 4 of them. Only 2 returned it. David Dyer and Peggy Jones did not return it. We invited all school board candidates to come and meet our membership and have a Q&A. We did it with the sheriffs, county commissioner, state committee man, state committee woman. Again, not endorsing those races, but
Giving
being
them a
educated,
platform.
being educated voters and just having a smaller demographics of people and being able to ask those hard questions and not have 600 people, like at the sheriff's, candidate forum, right? And we, so it was those 3 things that we could have done: a forum, the survey, and inviting. So we did 2 of the 3 here in Indian River County. So we endorsed through membership Rob McCullum and Kevin McDonald.
Okay. All right. So voting local, and like I said, part of my philosophy about local politics is being a red county in a red state. If you want to be a public servant, a politician, whether you're left-leaning or right-leaning, the only way to get a job in a red state or a red county pretty much is to put the red tie on. So I think it's very important what you guys do with the school board candidates and all the candidates, because like you said, educated voters are going into the booth, going into election day with the right mindset and voting for the right people. Just because they're endorsed by a so-called Republican from the rich neighborhood doesn't mean they're conservative. But learning about the candidates, all of them, I think will give you a better insight as to where these candidates, whether they're county commissioner, sheriff, or school board member. I believe what you guys do local and some other groups like Binford Chronicles and TGI Now on Sunshine Journal, I think exposing them, good or bad, educates the voters we can get to listen. So if you're watching at home, pay attention to your local elections, because it all starts local. If there's problems like red flag laws, I try to explain it to colleagues that it's not necessarily a sheriff's issue, it's a legislative issue. So the people you vote for locally to go to Tallahassee or Washington makes every bit to do with it. And not just that, the other offices we vote for, the inter-party politics, the support that goes around, I think plays a part. So just choosing people in one branch of government, the right people can influence the people in the other branches of government. So I think encompassing all your candidates, I think that's really good, not just the school board. So I look forward to seeing more, and I look forward to your interview on Monday, right?
Yes, Monday at 12 o'clock.
All right.
Yep.
Where can anybody find you? Any social media or an email you want to put out, or website?
Sure, absolutely. So it's Moms for Liberty, Indian River, Florida. Again, each chapter is its own governing body. We're in 48 states, over 300 chapters in just a couple years. But we're on Facebook, so we have a private and a public page. We have a website, and you could just, again, type in, Moms for Liberty, Indian River, Florida, and all of that will populate.
Okay. Great. Thank you, and we'll see you for our next one. Thank you.
Have a great night.